Welcome to Honest Car Reviews, and today I have the privilege of reviewing the Zeekr 001. This is the privilege edition, meaning 544 horsepower, four-wheel drive and all of the specs that you might need from a shooting brake all-electric car. And in this review I'm going to tell you all about the Zeekr brand, the Zeekr 001, and of course how it fits with the competition, because this is from China and it needs to deliver on all aspects to get into the extremely fierce electric car market. So find out in this review. This exterior is quite similar to another car or concept, and that is the Lynk Co concept. So this car is actually, or this platform or this car is owned by Geely. So it is Geely, and Geely owns Lynk Co. And what Geely decided to do was, let's scratch the concept. Put it on a Zeekr new car brand, launch it, and also get it to Europe. That doesn't really happen in car brands that are in Europe or US. Stuff happens really quickly in China, and we're seeing that right here with the Zeekr. You see this double vertical lights looks really good. It looks very luxurious, and this is a luxurious car. It's an expensive car, and we'll get to that later. Here's a quite interesting detail, because there's the Eiffel Tower and then there's that famous bridge in London. So I don't know if this is Zeekr's way of telling that this is a European specific car, but quite an interesting detail nonetheless. And here we are at the rear part of the Zeekr 001. And here's where you see that it is a shooting brake, but it is actually playing with your mind, because here is a spoiler and it actually cuts around here. So the windscreen or rear windscreen goes here. So it isn't as shooting brakey as you might think it actually is. It's playing a little bit with your mind with the colors. But what do you think here in the rear? Does it look good? Does it look bad? I think it looks kind of good, especially with this LED rear lights. Looks incredible in the dark. We'll get to the rear luggage space, because that's quite important. And if you follow me, simple button, which didn't work there. There works. About 530 liters. And underneath you have a little more star space, and you can even fall down this one level lower to get even more space. If you follow the rear seats down in the 60-40 configuration, which these are, you get over 2,000 liters of space. But here's an issue. This is a shooting brake with that very inclined rear windscreen, which means that you can basically just load up here a little bit of a loading lip as well. And what about the hard specs? Well, it has a 100 kilowatt hour battery, and you have about 200 kilowatt of charging speed. And you find that charging port at the rear left side here. And it is actually engine powered. Let's try that again. Technology issues, you know. No cover for the fast charging that is common in American and European cars. Just the fast CCS charging speed here. 200 kilowatt of charging, which means that this should theoretically, and it often does, what I've heard from other reviewers, 20 to 80% in about 30 minutes. That's not the best, but this is a very big battery. So it gives you over 500 kilometers of range, but this is also the four-wheel drive car. If you go for the max range, you get over 600 kilometers of pure electric range. And in the rear seats here, wow, a lot of space in here, especially for the knees. quite okay foot space, quite okay amount of headspace as well. The seats are fairly comfortable, but not that much lower thigh support. You can change the incline of the rear seat, so down. You also have the possibility to change the track, the lighting, and of course the climate control individually for the rear seats. No touch control here, just regular buttons. And on the side here as well can you also control the incline of the seat. And you can also control this seat. So if you want even more space. Welcome to the driver's seat of the 001. Wow, what a place to be initially. The quality of the materials feels rather high. Not too much use of, that piano black plastic. You have this Mercedes-esque storage space here. We have 2 USB-C plugs and 1 power outlet. And a really large storage space underneath here. You have this part is quite big and looks a little bit towards not of Polestar 2. Not in a bad way. The location of the wireless charging pad really good, easily located and makes it easy to put your phone there. 2 cup holders, reverse normal drive selector with parking. There's no way of activating the car. You just put the foot on the brake, and then you go into drive and you're off. Very Volvo-ish. A lot of different materials. This is the privilege, meaning a lot of copper details on the inside, but also on the exterior side. So you see on the sides here the door handle, the windscreen buttons, the side windows buttons, locking and unlocking, the steering wheel. It's a decent place to be in here, and it should be for the price of just about 70,000 euros. Let's put it into competition with the likes of the BMW i4 and of course the Polestar 4, Mercedes EQE, and those types of cars. So it's in a really competitive segment which it really needs to deliver in, and we'll get to that later on. Unfortunately, we have now come to the part where I need to talk about the things that I've experienced with this Zeekr 001, which I do not like, and you as a buyer absolutely need to know. I had questions about the technology, the user environment, and that's what we'll do a deep dive into. And first of all, this Yamaha sound system, 13-14 speakers, should sound really good. Yamaha is a well-known brand. Well, I haven't seen Yamaha in another car manufacturer before, but there's something wrong with this sound system. I can't imagine that Yamaha would let this sound that it is in this car out on the market. It just sounds really bad. The bass, that is, just rattles, shrieks as when you bump up the bass. Doesn't sound good at all. Continuing on with the sound, when you have the radio on, the sound level goes up and down without me doing anything, and I don't have the navigation on, and the connection loses really easily, even in very small tunnels. That's not good at all. Doesn't happen with other cars. That's why I mention it. Driving the car, you have of course the steering wheel. The left part controls the cruise control. Other thing controls things like the sound haptic feedback controls. Activating the cruise control, you push this button. Then to increase the speed, you push this upper part here, and you go up in 5 km/h increments. However, it doesn't always let me increase the speed or decrease the speed. Nothing really happens. I press, then I have to reset the cruise control. Doesn't work 100% of the time, maybe 50% of the time. Speaking of the cruise control, works okay in high speeds, but in low and medium speeds, it's really jerky. Always tries to keep that distance. So it accelerates really hard. Not good at all. And to continue on, there are more things I need to talk about. I actually need to put on my phone because I have some notes on how many things that I've actually come across with this car. The seating position, I talked about the seats being really good, but you see this space here, I'm quite tall with my legs and I'm basically hitting right now, which means that yeah, I should sit further back, but then I'm not really reaching the steering wheel. I get tired in the back side here. And of course I can change the steering wheel position, but this is how far back it goes. So the seating, how I'm sitting, is not that comfortable. When I start the car, when it's been damp outside, it's been complaining about the front camera, visibility, stuff braking, acceleration, viewer control, automatic braking, stuff like that. Has been a warning, then it has worked flawlessly, or not flawlessly, but it has worked. So you get worried that everything is broken, but then it works. There's no possibility of deselecting the one pedal driving. If you go into here, driving, you have regenerative braking, standard, high. You can't press it off, you can't just cruise. And I think that is all the things that I noticed that I'm not that fond of regarding the technology of this car. While we're driving on a side road here, just a little bit bumpy, I can quickly tell you about the terrain mode, because this is the Privilege edition, which means that this car has air suspension. I can put this in terrain mode, so it bumps up the shocks to give me more road clearance. Just a smart thing to have. I've driven this quite a lot, and on the highway at around 120 kilometers an hour, on 15 degrees outside centigrade, it will use about 30 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer, which I think is quite high, but that's what electric cars use when you get on up to those speeds. When you're driving more sensibly, you get it about 19, 18. And here we have a corner. Steering is quite light. We're in a comfort mode as well, which means that if I mash the throttle, there's a delay of about 1-2 seconds before the power is distributed, basically. And then the power is distributed very linearly and comfortably. A good calibration there. But what I don't like, and what I talked about before, is that one pedal driving. When I release the throttle, it is hammering that regenerative brakes, and I don't like that at all, especially on long journeys. Then you have to basically use the cruise control to not do this back and forth action. It's very difficult to keep the same speed without being very, very careful and cautious. I wouldn't say that the chassis control or the undulations and the broken roads or the vibration that comes from it is ironed out from this air suspension. There was a quite noticeable movement of the body that I felt through the seat, which in an air suspension car I don't think that you should experience. There is the performance version which has regular coils and springs, and what I've heard is that it's basically as comfortable as that car. So I talked about the consumption, I talked about regular driving, and it does that fine, but I also talked about the cruise control and how it's quite aggressive in trying to keep that distance in front of it. So very aggressive on the throttle, but also aggressive on the regenerative braking. So it's not that smooth. You have to really recalibrate your brain for that. And once you do it, then it's super, super comfortable, super, super relaxing. It's as comfortable as any other car on the market in the segment. For the most amount of the time, it powers only 2 wheels. If it's the front or the rear, I'll let that being left unsaid. But if you start to push and you need some more rotation or you need some more power sense somewhere, it will do that. In about 0.4 seconds with the clutch pack, very short amount of time. we're on some twisty roads and we need to set on the sport mode, and it does 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in under 4 seconds, about 3.5 something, 3.8, and 544 horsepower is nothing to laugh about. So let's see here. Driving this car quickly takes a lot of concentration. It's a heavy car, it's a big car, it doesn't tighten around you. Yes, you have a lot of power, you have a lot of grip, and you cover ground really quickly. But this is not a sports car. It doesn't shrink around you the way a BMW i4 does, or even a Polestar 2. But this feels like a bigger car. It's almost 5 meters long. And of course the privilege means something in terms of being more relaxed maybe. And the regular springs from the performance version might give you some more feedback. But the general setup of the car doesn't feel as dirty, it's more relaxed. And I think that's a good choice from Zeekr to design it that way, because it doesn't need to have that all performance setup. There are other cars for that. This finds its own way. What are my final conclusions for the Zeekr 001? Well, it brings a lot of value for money in terms of raw specifications. Good electric range, big battery, good charging speed, a lot of power, good choice of materials, those kinds of things. But the tech in many places brings the usability and the luxurious level that this car should deliver down a couple of notches. It is not finally tuned the way a car of this price should be. And that pains me, because it's a super competent car that has a lot to offer. And that is my final conclusions for the Zeekr 001.